Hi, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and start with chapter 2, which is titled Seeing the Void. So, a year later, I returned to the Monroe Institute for one of their advanced programs, which was specifically geared towards inner guidance. Naturally, my own agenda was a continuation of the question, what is reality? While there, we learned how to access higher states of awareness in which we could receive inner guidance to whatever our specific issue was. Looking back now, it seems reasonable to assume that this is exactly when the shit hit the fan. I can't say for sure, as there are many landmarks along the way in my journey, but this is when things seemed to go from a steady bike ride in the park to an out-of-control rocket ship to the farthest reaches of the universe. I may never be sure as to what exactly happened, but as far as I could tell, I sparked a conversation with the universe, God, reality, or whatever you want to call the supreme source. And that conversation continued for at least 2 years after this week-long retreat was over. Only there was no longer a sense of two-way communication. This had become more of a telling, or more specifically, a showing. And my role was only that of a witness. My question was already abundantly clear. What is the ultimate truth of our existence? The very nature of reality itself. The answer came, but it took 2 years to unfold. Immediately after leaving the Monroe Institute, I started to have strange and mystical, spontaneous experiences during the course of my everyday life. I was used to having different mystical experiences from meditation, salvia, hemisync tapes, etc. But all these experiences were quite natural for what they were, and therefore almost expected. But what I was never prepared for were these intense, out-of-these-world experiences that were happening to me spontaneously while I was just living my everyday normal life. Some of the stuff just seemed random at times, like when the whole world was just revealed to me as being made of nothing but light. Just imagine sitting in your living room and suddenly everything grows so bright that it is like someone turned up God's dimmer switch. The light saturated the landscape to the point that all lines of distinction faded away, revealing only brilliant luminosity. That's the kind of stuff that would happen at least monthly. But for the most part, these events did not seem random at all. In fact, it became quite obvious to me that I was systematically being shown something by the universe. Every once in a while, one of these showings would manifest as a full-on vision. I had heard of Indians and various mystics having profound visions before, but never in my wildest dreams would I ever expect to actually experience a vision for myself. However, this is exactly what would be thrust upon me several times a year from the year of 2000 to 2002. And always when I least expected it. The following is an account of the first time that this happened. The journal entry is May 5th, 2000. About a week after my return from my last visit to the Monroe Institute, I had a very profound vision. In one moment, I am standing by the countertop, looking at the refrigerator, but not really noticing it, because I was absorbed in this newfound state of expanded awareness that I had discovered at the retreat. The next moment, I suddenly found that my perspective, or my point of awareness, had popped out about 2.5 feet behind me. Immediately after finding myself in this position, it was as if I penetrated beyond the visual field of the kitchen and saw deeply into the nature of reality itself. If memory serves me correctly, I would say that the outer edges of my visual experience, or my visual field, I could still see the corners of my kitchen, but it was basically ignored in the same way that we ignore what's outside the movie screen when we are deeply absorbed in the movie. At this point, it was as if I was seeing beyond the appearance of my kitchen, and what was being shown to me instead resembled an ocean of sorts. It was like looking at a boundless, shimmering ocean from a bird's eye view, yet knowing that what I was looking at represented the infinite universe itself. And then, as if I were being taught a lesson, the scene shifted ever so slightly to emphasize the countless little individual tiny droplets that are making up this infinite sea of energy. But it wasn't so much the visual aspect of the experience that I found so profound, but the direct knowing that was at the root of the vision itself. It's as if something's being demonstrated to me, like someone's showing it to me. The lesson was very clear. Is the universe made up of one or many? I was being shown that it is both, depending upon your perspective. I knew immediately that what I was being shown was the supreme source itself, or what we have historically referred to as God, or the One, is actually manifesting as the universe itself, this world itself, by dreaming infinite dreams simultaneously. Each one of us as individuals is ultimately just one of God's dreams interacting with God's countless other dreams. As I realized that I was simply dreaming my life, I actually started to wake up. I can't explain it, but physically it felt like it does when you are knocked unconscious. I actually felt myself starting to lift towards the ceiling, and reality began to feel choppy. I knew that I was waking from the dream, and I immediately became terrified as I thought of my wife and daughter, whom I would leave behind. I pulled back and scrambled for some paper to try to capture what I had just experienced. For the next year, I was at my absolute peak in terms of spiritual seeking. The pursuit of God, truth, or the ultimate reality had already been an obsession for several years, but this next year was flavored with the knowing that I was closing in on my target. My practice was beginning to bear significant fruit, which encouraged me to invest ever more increasing time and energy into my quest. For the most part, this worked seamlessly into my daily life. Conversations with my wife or playing with my daughter provided perfect opportunities to practice, as I found the whole essence of spirituality could be distilled down to forgoing your sense of self in deference to the moment. So, if I was playing with my daughter, I would be completely absorbed in whatever fantasy we were creating together. And if I was spending time with my wife, I would lose myself in our dialogue to the point that nothing else in the world seemed to exist in that moment. Perhaps nothing did. But in other ways, my spiritual pursuit had become such an obsession that it started conflicting with my daily life. For example, we had just moved out to the mountains, and after renting for a year, my wife wanted to buy a house. From my perspective, that was simply impossible. I knew that I was on a collision course with God, and I couldn't look away from the road in front of me, at least not now. I had so much momentum in training my mind to be still and unfettered that I just knew that to even start thinking about looking at other houses would all but destroy this placid mind space that I'd worked so hard to achieve. Fortunately, my wife was very understanding when I would respond to her plans dismissively, claiming that I couldn't be bothered by any other pursuit except for the pursuit of God. At this point in my life, it was truth or bust. I felt like I was so close that if I just stayed the course, I would eventually break through to finally discovering the answers to life's ultimate questions. What are we? Where are we? And why are we? I'm not sure of exactly what happened next. It may have been that I had worn myself down to the intense seeking, or due to the intense seeking. It may have been that I had come to the point that I recognized how it was my desire that was fueling my spiritual search. Either way, both of these factors came together and manifested as what I termed the last desire. I had become so sickened by the taste of desire that I came to the point that I desired nothing more than to be free from all the desires, including my desire for truth. I was sick of feeling needy, as if I were always missing something or waiting for something else to make me complete. And this takes us back to where I began the book. On May 31st, 2001, I continue the journal entry that started the book. I will try to explain what I mean by quitting, surrendering. We are always doing and moving towards something else. We don't realize it consciously, but in our own twisted way, what we are trying to do is to complete ourselves, as if this could actually be done. It is an endless game, and it goes way beyond the rat race. That is, we all know. That is all we know, so we don't even recognize that we are constantly in the process of self-completion. We are constantly adding and moving, never sitting still. Our lives are dizzying, and it is rare that we actually live them. Instead, they seem to do us. Isn't it odd that we just can't sit still and remain quiet for an hour or so? We always need sound or visuals or some kind of mental masturbation because we are so damned afraid of ourselves or silence. Stillness feels like death because we know no pleasure other than distraction. So that day, I quit. I declared myself done, complete, and finished. I was no longer working towards anything. No longer trying to complete or better myself. All right, so that's the end of the journal entry. And I write, the reason that I started the book at this point in my journey, when I decided to quit, surrender, was because when reviewing my journey through my journal entries, it became obvious that the most important part of my spiritual journey was the very act of surrendering itself. That's the whole thing, surrendering. The path is the goal, surrendering. The path is the goal, Surrendering is the path. Surrendering is the goal. In fact, the very essence of spirituality could be said to be nothing more than surrendering yourself to reality. Whatever you consider the ultimate reality to be, God, Jesus, Allah, Shiva, the One, or even awareness, it does not seem to matter in the least as far as the act of surrendering. The only thing that matters is the actual act of surrender itself. Trusting reality unconditionally. Yielding your own will to reality. And wanting for nothing other than what reality provides. To illustrate why I feel so strongly about the profound nature of the act of surrendering, it's important to point out that I had discovered meditation a full decade ago, and I had been a serious practitioner for more than half of those years. But it was only after this particular act of surrendering that 4 days later, to be exact, that I would finally begin to receive the answer to the ultimate question of our existence. Here is what I wrote after this earth-shattering experience. Journal entry, July 21st, 2001. On June 4th in 2001, I was playing my guitar to George Harrison's My Sweet Lord when I distinctly heard a disembodied voice telling me to look behind me. I did so, and then I saw it, the truth. I saw behind me, and I have not been the same since. When I looked behind me, I saw the void. I saw the cosmic joke. And here it is. All of us are currently only perceiving at 180 degrees. But that's only half of our story. There is a whole other half to our existence that we are amazingly unaware of. The best way to explain to someone what I mean by perceiving at 180 degrees would be to have them stick their arms out like wings and then orient them just out of range of their perception at 180 degrees exactly. I would then point out that if they intend to see what they currently assume to be behind them, then they must draw their attention to what is assumed to be behind them. It is the shifting of our attention that changes what is appearing in our 180-degree scene. Reality is observer dependent. What I'm saying there is that if you hold out your arms 180 degrees and you look out and you notice that's the world, and if you intend to see what you think is behind you, you think that you walk around to go see what is already there. And what I experience, what I'm trying to explain is that you don't move at all. You intend to experience what you expect to see behind you, and that reality manifests in front of you, still 180 degrees. You never leave this perspective of seeing 180 degrees. You go to the store, it's right here. You go to the mall, it's right here. You go to work, it's right here. Everything is always right in front of you. The reason that we have remained unaware of the fact that we only perceive at 180 degrees is because the other half of our being is unmanifest, and therefore it goes unnoticed. However, this time when I looked to see behind me, I saw in 360 degrees. The other side of what I was missing in my 180-degree normal perception is the void. I swear to you that when I looked behind me, the filters dropped and I saw the truth. I was simultaneously seeing behind me, which was the void, and in front of me, which was my living room, but now I saw the living room for what it really was. Seeing in this way revealed to me that the living room in front of me was just a picture on a screen, a holographic picture. I was not in the room. I was just awareness. I saw that I had always been pure awareness pressed up against something like a movie screen. And that is what we all are. It's just a big screen, a big fucking holographic screen. I couldn't see the screen which revealed my living room. I could see the screen which revealed my living room, and I could simultaneously see behind me, which was infinity. I started writing everything down sloppily, and it kept coming down. It kept coming on. All I had to do was stop writing, and reality would unfold to reveal what is always behind us, the void. So in case that's not clear, what I'm trying to say is, I had an experience where something said, look behind you. And when I looked behind me, instead of seeing the other wall of my living room, I saw the void. I saw blackness, nothing but void. But yet in front of me, the image of the living room continued. So at the same time, I could see completely behind me the void, 180 degrees, and then 100 degrees in front of me, I could see the world. And this has happened simultaneously. As I'm seeing the living room in front of me, behind me is just the void. And that contrast, the contrast of the void, seeing the void behind me and the living room in front of me, that's what revealed it to be on a screen. But usually we're so close to the screen, we don't think that we're looking at a screen. We think that we're in the screen. We think that we're, in the world walking around on this 3D object. But in reality, you're just awareness, and images appear on the screen right in front of you. And if you intend to go to the store, that's just what appears in front of you. All right, so I draw a picture. Basically, I create a picture, a graphic to depict what the experience actually was. So this is what the experience actually was. I could see in front of me, which is my living room, and at this very same time, I could see behind me, which was infinite blackness, but not just blackness as in blank, a full blackness, a living blackness, an alive blackness of the void. So this is the picture that I created to demonstrate the vision that I had. And this lasted for minutes on end. I would go back to writing and then seeing the void and being blown away, and going back to writing more, and just noticed, it just kept going as long as I paid attention to it. All right, so then I continue. I am sane enough to realize how insane I must sound while carrying on about nothing behind us in some kind of virtual reality screen in front of us. In fact, after this happened, I didn't dare share the experience with anybody except my wife, because I realized how existentially devastating the implications of this experience were. I thought that this must be what it feels like to be a witness to a UFO or a near-death experience or any other event that flies in the face of conventional wisdom. When you try to share an experience of this nature, it feels strangely intrusive because you are implying that there is something radical about the nature of reality to the person that you are sharing with. And they probably know little or nothing about it. In other words, if I really did see a UFO, then this implies that you also live in a world where UFOs exist. I don't know how you feel about that and its philosophical implications. If I tell you about a near-death experience where I saw heaven, and then I'm also implying that an afterlife definitely exists for you as well. So you can imagine how uncomfortable it was for me when I finally did try to share my experience with friends and family. After a month or so, I did try and share with those that I had shared previous spiritual experiences with. What became apparent to me is that everyone I shared this experience with seemed to think that I was describing a situation like in the movie The Matrix, which posited that we are all trapped in a shared virtual reality. But the truth is that what I am suggesting is far more profound and perhaps even more disturbing than the simple plot twist that we are just having a shared dream of the world. In The Matrix, the plot was about a real person having an experience. He had been tricked into thinking that he was seeing the real world, when in fact he was only seeing a virtual reality, a simulation of the real world. If the character arose from his trance or somehow transcended the simulated world, he woke up to the real world. So, where my experience differs from the Matrix is that there is no real person and there is no real world to wake to. It may seem like a minor difference, but it's a huge difference. In my experience, when one transcends the illusion or awakens from the trance, one sees that you really, let me start over. In my experience, when one transcends the illusion or awakens from the trance, one sees that what you really are is not simply another person, but instead pure disembodied awareness. What you see is not a fixed and solid world outside of you, but instead the appearance of a world displayed on a screen of consciousness perhaps, but an actual screen nonetheless. Perhaps you can grasp the difficulties of explaining such an understanding. Reading my account now makes me aware that I was emphasizing what I called a movie screen too much. I could understand why, because prior to that experience, all the contents that appeared in the screen made up my whole world. To have everything I have ever knew with my five senses revealed to be images on or in a screen was absolutely earth-shattering. But in retrospect, I see my attachment to that particular aspect as a little misleading in terms of trying to communicate the actual experience. What I would emphasize now, upon reflection, would be that my total perception suddenly and spontaneously expanded to encompass all directions simultaneously. Not only could I still see the world in front of me, which all sighted folks do, but my visual field was now expanded from the 180 degree to a complete 360 degree, thus revealing what was behind me. But what I saw behind me was not my couch and table as what would be expected. Instead, what I saw behind me was the void, the unmanifest, the unborn. The simplest way to explain it is to say that I was the center of experience, and what I was experiencing was both the manifest world in front of me and the unmanifest behind me. The only description that I could use in regards to explaining what the unmanifest looked like, which I admit sounds almost comical, would be to say that it looked just like it does when you close your eyes. But its quality was not simply nothing in the normal way we use the word. It was more of a raging nothing. The qualities that I would attribute to the unmanifest or the void that was behind me would be that it was aware, empty, and eternal. I was seeing completely. The world in front of me was revealed as a screen, and what was contrasted, and that was contrasted with the world behind me, pure emptiness. The reason I kept carrying on like a madman about the whole world appearing on this movie screen was because the experience was exactly like being so absorbed in a movie that you forget that you were in a theater. Sometimes something interrupts your attention and the spell is broken. When that happens, you notice the theater and the screen and the movie is playing on. In a similar manner, when my attention on the world in front of me was spontaneously disrupted, it resulted in my seeing the empty space in which the world appears in. The reason why I kept describing myself as awareness smooshed up against a movie screen was because normally the world appeared to be at no distance from me. Therefore, it appeared to make up my total experience. However, this vision, however, during this vision, it was as if I had backed up far enough from the movie screen we call the universe to notice the aware space that the universe exists in. That aware space is the other half of the story that we call the world. So I use a diagram here with the classic yin-yang, which reminds me of the circle. That's why I have that there. It's my interpretation of the circle. I guess my circle is the interpretation of the yin-yang. And I write, seeing in 360 degrees reminded me of the classic yin-yang symbol. The white half was the world or universe in front of me, and the black half was the unmanifest behind me. The curving line that unifies the black and white halves represent the inseparability of the world in front of me and the unmanifest behind me. So basically, this is a picture of the world. That's what I saw behind me, that was in front of me, and this line just represents, or this curvy line represents the inseparability of these two, how it's just one. There is not two things. There's not the world behind me and the world in front of me. There's just this, and as I experienced it, seeing the world in front of me and the void behind me. So we continue. Everything is living from this design naturally and unavoidably. But we have become so accustomed to our fascination with the white half of the circle that we have become blind to the black half, the unchanging. So the white half represents the role of form, the changing part. That's the only part that we notice. What we don't notice is the unchanging part, the aware part, the still part, the eternal part. That's the other half of ourself that we must get to know. That's the part of our lives that is here before us and before after us. As a consequence of this complete identification with the world of form, everyone takes themselves to be merely a person in that world of form and overlooks their natural reality, that they are also unchanging and infinite, aware space having an experience of personhood. This particular aspect of the experience has implications far beyond our earthly existence. It was immediately apparent to me that the basic subject-object design was also the root template for all of existence. It doesn't matter if you are an ant, a cow, a human, a chicken, an alien from another planet, or an amoeba. The design is always the same. You experience yourself as the subject located back here, perceiving the world as the object out there. And here's the diagram that I use. So we experience ourselves as the subject, the void, experiencing the object out there. That dichotomy is taking place whether or not you're dreaming, whether you're an alien having a subjective experience of an object, whether you're an angel, whether you're a god, whether you're a giraffe, anything. Out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, any experience that's going to be happening where something is happening, that is going to be the basic diagram, where there's going to be nothing having experience of something. And the only thing that's going to change is the little avatar, the little feet in front of you, the little legs. We got little human fingers. When a bat looks out, he sees wings. When an ant looks out, he sees his antenna. That's all that's going to change is the little avatar that you're going to see popping out. Instead of human legs, you're going to see whiskers of a kitten, or, the halo of an angel, the horns of a devil. Doesn't matter. Subject, object, experience. All right. It doesn't matter if you are awake, dreaming, if you die and go to heaven, because even with heaven, the fact that you are having an experience implies that you will perceive in this basic subject-object format. Because even with heaven, it doesn't matter. All right, I'm going to start over right there. It doesn't matter if you are awake, dreaming, or if you die and go to heaven. Because even with heaven, the fact that you are having the experience implies that you will perceive in this basic subject-object format, where you are awareness back here, experiencing heaven out there. The recognition of this eternal design immediately destroyed any illusion that I had of a permanent and fixed world that somehow exists independent of this basic subject-object template. Seeing that all of manifestation, whether it be our familiar daily world, the mental landscape in which we dream, or even the highest heaven, are all just changing appearances on the screen of consciousness. It obliterated any sense of solidity that I had once been projecting on the world as I had thought I knew it to be. This was an experience like no other. It resulted in a very real and significant shift in my everyday perspective. My normal perspective was to view myself as a physically separate being looking from the inside of a body outside into a solid and fixed world. But I had been spontaneously jolted out of this perspective into a more expansive perspective one that revealed that what I normally considered to be an outside world was actually just an appearance taking place inside of my mind's eye. From my new perspective, I saw that the outside is actually inside. There is an expression in mystical circles that speaks to what I had experienced and why this would forever change the way in which I would perceive the world. The expression says that once you recognize the snake to actually be a rope, you can never mistake the rope to be a snake again. So now that I had seen the world for what it actually was, mere content on the screen of consciousness, I could never again imagine the world to be the fixed and solid independent mass that I had once assumed it to be. In a very real way, the world as I knew it had died that day. But oddly enough, I didn't actually experience it as the death of my world. In fact, it actually felt like the death of myself in a way I could have never imagined prior to this. My very sense of self was shaken to the core. I was now brutally aware of the eternal void, which I had always been operating from. Up to this point in my life, I had exclusively identified with the changing world in front of me, never aware of the changeless backdrop, which is awareness itself, or true and unchanging nature. But with my discovery of this forgotten half of the picture came a sense of dying, as if my old limited sense of self was engulfed and encompassed by this new sense of self, a self that acknowledges the eternal, unchanging half of our experience. After this experience, I became fixated on this unchanging, eternal half to the point that it had become an obsession. I noticed that all of the content of my mind, whether it be my thoughts and feelings or the myriad objects that I perceive in the world, are all simply the mind in motion, while the void is the very same mind, yet unmoved. I continued my search for truth and the ultimate reality. My meditation practice progressed as stillness became my new beacon. And that ends chapter 2. So stay tuned next week and we'll work on chapter 3, the one and the many. Thank you again and see you soon.